Hey everybody, and welcome to Bits of Board, where we're talking board games, miniatures, cards, and dice. My name's Michael, and today we're going to be checking out Aeon's End. Now this is a cooperative deck building game, something that we're all pretty familiar with right now, but this one has got something else up its sleeve. Aeon's End takes place in a post-apocalyptic fantasy world where humanity is, all they've got left is this one settlement under the ground. It's called the Gravehold, and it's an ancient haunted place. It's just not good, but it's all we've got left. And they are every day beset on by these Nemesis monsters, these evil, foul creatures that are trying to wipe out the last fragments of humanity. So players take the role of the characters, the inhabitants of the Gravehold. These are the heroes that have the power to come up against those Nemesis monsters, survive, and, lead their population to another day in the haunted evil place. Anyway, it's got this very unique anti-shuffling mechanism where a player's discard pile is flipped over to become their new deck. It's got quite a bit of difficulty behind it, but not so much so as you're not going to be enjoying yourself and winning the occasional game, which is always a bonus. Let's finish with the intro. Let's have a look at how it's set up and how it's played, and we'll come back and have a chat about it later. Alright, let's go through the player board setup, guys. So as you can see, I've already got a couple of charge tokens set out for this player, as well as a total of 10 health points up there. Each player starts with 10 health, and they're going to be losing a lot of that throughout the game. The other thing we've got to do is randomize the player number. So I've got a couple of tokens here, one for each player in a 4-player game. Shake it up, and then you deal one out to each player. So this here is player number 3, and that helps a little bit later on when you're going through turn order stuff. Other things we've got to do is we've got to set up the player decks. Now, as you can see, let's have a look. The starting deck for this player consists of 5 crystals. So here I have 5 crystals. Now, if there are any other cards in there, I would have to take care to make sure that the order is correct. So while this has just 5 crystals, if it's, let's say, had, 2 spells and 3 crystals, I would have to make sure that the 2 spells go on top of the deck, because deck order is important in this game. Very, very important. So that's the player's deck. He's also got a small hand of cards here. He's got 2 sparks. Where are they? Here are the 2 sparks. These are your basic damage spells for the game. We've also got 2 crystals. 2 crystals, and we've also got an amethyst shard. Now the amethyst shard is unique to this player, so every player has got their unique starter resource, and they usually provide a resource as well as giving you a little bit of extra bonus stuff. So this one here allows any ally to draw a card and then discard a card, allowing them to sort of change up what they've got in their hand a little bit. So very useful there. Now, the other thing we've got to set up is the breaches, and we've got that going on up the top here. So we've got, as you can see here, we've got an open breach for breach 1. Over here, we've got a left-aligned breach. Now, I won't say what this means just yet, but it is important to get these alignments right. Over here, we've got a right-aligned breach for breach number 3. And finally, breach number 4 is, well, down-aligned, I guess. There we go, cool. All that's left is for players to choose and set up their Nemesis for the encounter, so let's check that out. Now, Aeon's End comes with a fairly decent number of Nemesis monsters to come up against in the game. The base edition has 4 monsters just on its own. Each monster has its own deck, and when you set up the Nemesis, you randomize which cards are going to come out, so it's very unlikely you're ever going to see the same Nemesis twice. There are currently 2 available expansions to go for, and these add another 3. And you can pick up a couple more on Kickstarter right now. So they're currently funding for their next wave of expansions, which is only going to make this game grow and grow and grow. So, with that being said, we're just going to pick one. We're going to pick the basic, the good, starty off one. This is the Rageborn. Now, looking at the Rageborn, there's a bunch of flavor text on the back, which is lovely. It also comes with a nice little setup guide. Now, the Rageborn's got his own separate strike deck, so this includes some information on how to set that up, as well as we also have to give him a Fury token as well. So we are going to flip him over, give him his Fury token, and we're going to build his decks. So his pile of cards includes a bunch of cards here. These form the strike deck. We have been instructed to shuffle these ones up and place them face down to form the strike deck. Now, each Nemesis also comes with a stack of cards, and I've separated these into 3 different decks: a tier 1 deck, tier 2, and tier 3. Now, the main deck that we're going to come up against in the game is actually going to be made up by a number of each of these tiers. So for this deck, we're going to start off with by shuffling up our tier 3s, because they are going to be at the bottom of the pile, and we're going to draw 7 of these. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we're going to shuffle up our tier 2 deck, and we're going to deal 7 more onto the top of these. Finally, our tier 1 cards, shuffle them up, and we're going to deal 8. Now, players should also set up the life of their Gravehold. So the Gravehold is the home of the players, the thing that they're trying to protect from these Nemesis. The Gravehold starts with 30 life. So as you can see, I've set up the counters there, and we just pop that to the side. Let's pop that over there. Now, players have also got to set up the life dial for the Nemesis. So this guy here, he's got 70 life to get rid of, my lord. All right, so we set that up to be 70. We chuck that nearby. Let's pop that there, and we get stuck into it. And here we've got the marketplace. Now, the marketplace consists of a bunch of different cards that players can purchase on their turns, adding them to their decks. Now, this is one of the recommended starting decks, but there's actually a number of different cards that you can use to either customize the deck or randomize it for a little bit more of a challenge. Now, there's always going to be 3 different types of gems, and these are the ones that players buy to increase their resource production. Then there's going to be 2 relics. Now, relics have varying powers throughout the game, but these ones here specialize in making it a little bit cheaper to improve the breach and also get rid of unwanted cards in your deck. So maybe some of the older crystals and stuff like that to make room, to make it easier to draw some of the more powerful cards. Finally, we're going to have 4 spell cards that are available for purchase, and players are going to use these to increase their damage output, filling their deck with powerful spells that'll help win them the game. Now, there's a huge number of combinations of cards that can come out, and if you want to spice things up by making it a little bit more randomized, they've actually included a randomizer deck, which players can use to help populate this. Now, players are going to have to follow the rules of 3 gems, 2 relics, 4 spells, that sort of thing, but they can also experiment with having some higher cost, more powerful cards and some other combinations out there as well. And when it comes time to take on a Nemesis with a higher difficulty, then, you're going to have a little bit of strategy to fall back on. Alrighty, last thing that you've got to do before you play is set up the turn order deck. Now, this consists of a number of cards, 1 for each player. So we've got 1 for player 4, player 3, player 2, and player 1. And we add to that 2 Nemesis encounter cards. There we go. So we add these together, shuffle it all up like that. And then when we're ready to play, we draw the top card and the Nemesis will go first. This pretty much makes sure that the turn order is fresh throughout the game. So sometimes, the Nemesis will get 2 goes in a row and just cause some serious damage. But to make up for that, we're going to have all the other players play before the Nemesis gets another turn. So with that being said, let's prepare that Nemesis deck properly and let's have a look at how this game plays. Now, there are 3 phases in each player portion of the game. The first is the casting phase. At this point in time, you would cast any spells that you've attached to any of your breaches up the top there. At the moment, first turn, we've got nothing prepped, so we kind of skip that and move straight on to the main phase. During the main phase, players will have a look at their hand of cards and they will choose to do things with it. So they can, prep spells. So we've got a couple of spells here. These are our basic spells. We've got the Spark. So players can prep a spell to a breach, an open breach, and to a closed breach there. The only difference between these is that an open breach, you can choose whether to cast that in the turn. If you come to your next casting phase and you don't think it's a good idea to cast that spell, you don't have to. But if you've got a spell Attached to a closed breach, well, you have to cast that no matter what. Now, the good news is you're not always going to be stuck with 3 closed breaches. You are going to be able to upgrade these throughout the game, paying a certain amount of resources to twist them. And then once it's time, once you've got a top aligned yellow marker there, you can flip it over, whoa, come back and bring it back as an open breach, allowing you to play that card and then choosing whether or not to cast it. Breaches 3 and 4 give you bonuses when you cast from them once they're open. They give you bonus damage. It's cool, it's useful in the game, but yeah, that's breaches. Players can also choose to gain cards from the marketplace. Now, to do that, they've actually got to use their gem cards in their hand to gain resources, because each of those cards in the marketplace, they cost a resource. So right here, first turn for player 3, we have a total of 3 resources available to us. So we could spend those ones, popping them down, and we can draw a card that costs 3. Now, players can also head off to the marketplace in order to gain cards for their deck. So Adelheim over here, he's looking at spending 2 of his gems here. They gain 1 resource each, and he's going to grab a new card for his deck. In fact, it's going to be this Jade gem. Now, cards purchased, they don't go into their hand, but they go as the first card in the discard pile. Later on, at the end of the turn, we'll be placing any cards paid for picking up cards and that sort of thing, and we'll be putting them back in the discard pile on top of it. So when it comes time to actually bring the discard pile over to be your new deck, you're going to get that card pretty close to the top. Now, Adelheim's also got this Amethyst Shard card here. And now there's nothing he wants to buy that is 1 resource, but he can still play it to allow that special power to go off. So he plays that. Another player in the team, he picks up a card, he discards a card, fantastic. And then all of these will go back into the discard pile in any order they want. So our mate Adelheim here is going to pop that one in, and then these 2 here. Beautiful. The final phase is the draw phase, where players will draw from their deck to make up a total of 5 cards. So this is Adelheim's new hand for his next turn. That is fantastic. Next time his turn comes around, he's not going to have any cards to draw from. So we grab that discard pile, flip it over, and pop it straight down. The order doesn't change. You don't shuffle this, so it becomes an incredibly tough strategic fight to make sure that you've got the cards that you need together, allowing you to make the most of the spells that you're going to get. Alright, so when a Nemesis card comes out of the turn order deck, we take a Nemesis turn. Now there's a couple of steps in here. Firstly, we've got to resolve the effects of any cards already in play. Because this is the Nemesis first go, we don't have to do anything there. Then we've got the draw phase. So we draw a card from the Nemesis deck and we follow the instructions on here. So our Nemesis unleashes first. Now, Unleash is a special power. Each boss, each Nemesis has got their own Unleash power. And this particular one, it adds a Fury token to the board. So he's 1 step closer to hitting that strike deck. What else have we got here? The Gravehold suffers 3 damage. So this is immediately damaging the Gravehold, and there is no way to stop it yet. So let's bring that down to, what am I doing? Let's go to 27, and we continue. Now we check the strike conditions for the Rageborn. We have a look. If he has 4 rage tokens, we draw a strike deck card, but we don't have to do that today, which is good news. Now there are heaps of different cards that pop up from the deck here. Some of them, like we saw over here, are just attack cards, and sometimes he summons minions. So the Rageborn here has got this Banesire out, and we give him 6 life, and now he is a new target for our party to destroy. Unfortunately, he's got a persistent ability, so every time the Nemesis has a new turn, we follow its persistent ability. This one is Unleash. Oh, that is going to pump up the Fury tokens unless he can be gotten rid of. What else have we got? We've got another minion. Aha! And a power card. Now, power cards are really cool. They are usually extremely devastating to the player party, but they have a bit of a countdown. So you pop these down near the Nemesis deck. Let's just move this guy out of the way so you can see what I am talking about. Zoom. No. In. There we go. Haha. Now, as soon as a power card comes out, you have to chuck a number of power tokens on it as determined by the number next to power there. And each time the Nemesis card is drawn from the turn order deck, you remove one of these. As soon as you remove the last one, the power fires off. So this particular one here, he unleashes, so he gains that wonderful rage token there. And then any player in the player party will take 4 damage. Now players can, have a chat to themselves and, figure out who is best to take the damage. So that's a good start. Now the cool thing about these power cards is they can be prevented by players performing the to discard action up here. So if a player was to discard 3 cards, they could take this power card and discard it with no effect. So it's not like players don't have a good defense against these things. It's just sometimes it's tough to weigh up what to do in the situation. In the case there are no more cards to draw, the Nemesis will unleash 3 times. So in this case, our Rageborn here would gain 3 new Fury tokens. Right, so it's the end of the Rageborn's turn here, and we can see we've got more than 4 Fury tokens in action there. So, as explained in these additional rules down there, we have to draw the top card of the strike deck. So we've got the Frenzy Strike. The player with the most open breaches suffers 3 damage. So he attacks one of the characters straight up. Then we take this card from the strike deck and then shuffle it back in. So that card might come up again and, that player's going to be stuffed. But yeah, that's basically how it works. After the Rageborn strikes, we remove 3 of these tokens and we draw from the turn order again. And hopefully we don't see that Nemesis card pop up again. Now the Rageborn is just one of the Nemesis monsters that comes in the base game. We've also got things like, what do we got? The Carapress Queen here, who specializes in pumping out tokens that are actually going to be a bit of a damage sink for players. They can't let too many of these tokens rock up because they will lose the game very, very quickly. And we've got another bunch of monsters, as you saw in the expansion content as well. One of my absolute favorites being the Wayward One. Now this guy, placement is key. He's continually shifting his position on this little extra map. And so he's going to be completely changing the way damage works from spells. Now, Aeon's End is quite a challenging game, but not overly so. In fact, you can kind of fluff your way through the first couple of Nemesis encounters. But each time you play, you learn something new and you learn to consider new things like when the best times to purchase spells, resources, and keeping in mind different deck order elements. So the game ramps up nicely. If you play in the order of difficulty for the Nemesis, then life is good. It's probably not a good idea to jump straight into something like the Wayward One because he'll mess you up if you don't know anything about placement and trying to, open your breaches and all that stuff. Anyway, so I really appreciate a game that can teach you how to play the strategy elements while you're playing the game, while you're getting the hang of different, the simpler elements of the game. So yeah, now it's kind of obvious I'm a bit of a fan of this game and would highly recommend picking it up on its current Kickstarter with all the new expansion content if you haven't gotten it already. If you do already have it in the collection, you probably know about the Kickstarter and are just like, yeah, it's awesome. So let's have a look at why this game is so good. Yeah, it's a deck builder game. We've seen plenty of those, but it's got a lot of theme. Point 1 for theme. Fantastic. It's got very cool art style. Point 2 for art. 3, it's got some very unique gameplay elements, especially in the different Nemesis encounters, and in that no shuffling mechanism, which really adds that huge extra layer of strategy to the game. So, just off its gameplay art, fantastic. Now that's not to say it's the grand perfect game for everyone. I'm a huge fan of it, obviously. I can see that it would be a little bit fiddly for some players. The way that it uses life tokens across the board and the tiny little placement locations for that. The charging tokens, the power tokens, the charge tokens, those sorts of things. Little tiny bits of cardboard aren't ideal in a game like this where you're dealing with, cards and stuff. And then we've got the life wheels for the Gravehold and the Nemesis. And while they look great, they are a little bit shaky. So I don't know if you might have noticed it in the game that I found it hard to lock in a number. And that's because these things, when they are as tight as they are, I don't know if you can hear, I don't know, they're still pretty loose. So that's something that could be addressed and is hopefully going to be addressed in the next edition. But that's not too much. There's not much bad stuff I can say about this game. I will say that they've put together a wonderful world. If you're into the lore behind games, this includes the equivalent of a short story of stuff to go through. Each Nemesis and each character card has its own little blurb on the back, giving you a little bit more information about that particular, evil thing or character. And once you read it all, once you put it together, you've got a fairly decent idea of the world going on. This has got a well-developed, lore-rich world behind it, which is more than I can say for a lot of other deck builders out there. So if you like cooperative games, deck builders, and a dark fantasy setting, this is the game to get. If you're not into those things, I would still recommend trying this one because it has just got that much going on for it mechanics wise that you could bypass the theme and you'll love it just on its own merits. So yeah, go check out that Kickstarter campaign because it's got that base game and all the expansions going on there, plus component upgrades and extra dividers for those of us that love dividers like me. Anyway, if you've got any questions or anything like that, chuck them down in the comments below. If you just want to say g'day, do that too. As always, my name's Michael, this is Bits Aboard, we'll catch you next time.